What if I told you? What if I told you that everything is actually in reverse? That Yah's chosen people are the ones on earth who are living as cursed. That the first shall be the last, and the last shall be the first. And the American state and the American church can be institutions that can keep us in the dirt. Know your worth. What if I told you that he's the God of the oppressed? Sent his son down in the flesh just to deliver the sinner from his mess. What if I told you that Christ came for the prostitute, drug dealer, and slave? You know, the people they told us to keep away. What if I told you that Christ ain't a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, chilling while you're sinning kind of guy, passive on oppression, drenched in privilege for the white? It's the exact opposite. American Christian, open your eyes. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And you know what saddens me? The fact that the black community has been overlooked and pushed aside, and even lied to about their true identity. According to the Bible, genealogy, and history, the so-called African American are the true Hebrew Israelites. I hope you heard me clearly. Because this ain't a joke, this ain't no extremist movement. This is deep and we have no time for games. So what if I told you the truth? Would you call me insane? Let's see. To my brethren, all my black sisters and brothers, Isaiah said he leave our name from being called the chosen. That's why in this country we're only known as Negroes and coloreds, but we're Israelites. And the people in the power knew that the Bible is our true history, so they painted Jesus white and made laws that prevented us from knowing how to read. But nowadays, they just keep us hypnotized by the dopest beats, so you can't even see the tactics that are keeping you asleep.
This is all denied. And the worst thing you can do, if you're talking about it as on an individual level, if you anthropomorphize the nation, as I'm doing, the worst thing you can do to someone who has a split personality is to confront them about their condition. Because they've built their whole way of coping in the world, their whole way of functioning in the world is based on these two elements of their identity never meeting, never being reconciled, always being compartmentalized, what needs to happen is for it to be confronted. It needs to be reconciled. It needs to be dealt with. They're never willing to do that. So you look at this reality of who they are, what they've done, and how they have built their the psyche that they have, and then the ethos that they desperately need to maintain. Put all of that as the context for Black History Month, which is your obligation in Black History Month, because this is an obligation that is being put on black people in America. This isn't an opportunity, this isn't a celebration, this is an obligation being put on black people, that you will agree to contain the totality of your history in 28 days in February, and what you will talk about during those 28 days in February is not going to make us too uncomfortable. Your obligation is that you will go along with the maintenance of our fake ethos, which requires you to be very, very careful about what you say about our deeds and our actions and what actually our psyche is. And this is a manifestation of that psyche, of that dominating psyche, of that oppressive psyche that has built the whole this dominating and oppressive psyche that the ethos that they built is designed to deny and to pretend is not the case. The ethos that they built, of course, is not as oppressors but as liberators, not as enslavers but as saviors, as redeemers.
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you're doing great from whatever you're watching me from. I'm your host and present Hygienic Stories. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to talk about something called historical karma. Probably you've heard that word for the first time, or probably you haven't heard that word. Now, For the longest time, we understand the historical behavior of how race relations have been in the United States. And that being said, the power was left in the hands of majority of white people. At least few black people hold power. And the consequences of letting them have the power and what it has done to the United States. You see, since the time before emancipation and even after slavery emancipation, you understand that black people were at the verge because everything that white people dictated is how the lives of black people could be. And this led to a number of difficulties that the citizens of the United States, including black people, especially black people, had to go through. And brothers and sisters, today what we are envisioning what is called punishment, right? Because we have scholars who argue that United States is going through what we call a divine judgment. Honestly, this is what the United States is going through, and we call it a divine judgment. It is a divine judgment because, you see, when you build a nation, when a nation which's growth is based on suffering of a certain type of people, it doesn't go well because this group of people are now rising and calling out everything that is happening. And we are all seeing the United States crumbling. We are now seeing all this happening in real time. And brothers and sisters, what does this tell us? It tells us that the judgment time is here, and what the United States is going through is all but judgment, and that's what is happening right now. And we are seeing a system that was built on lies, a system that was built on historical revisionism, a system that was built on suffering, a system that was built on pillage, that was built on rape, is now going down. And we are seeing all these things happening in real time. I mean, we are in the 21st century. We are seeing all these things happening. And so, brothers and sisters, I just want you to buckle up with this video. It is really an interesting one. I hope you all get to learn and understand all these concepts, because at the end of the day, this channel brings about educational purposes, right? It's for educational purposes, and it's all about education, enlightening each other, and also learning from each other. So as you buckle off a video, I'm your host and presenter, Grotesque Stories, and I want you to watch this video. I'll be back, and then I'll be sharing my thoughts in regards to this. So let's keep watching. I'll be back.
Not as punishers. The ethos that they built is the complete opposite of what their history shows they are and what they've been. And obviously you can never change, you can never become even the aspirational ethos, because that's all you can call it. The American ethos is an aspirational ethos at best. That's giving them benefit of the doubt that they aspire to be liberators, they aspire to be redeemers, they aspire to be saviors, they aspire to be good and righteous and freedom loving and fighters for justice and so forth, defenders of rights and all of that. We can, benefit of the doubt, say that they aspire to be that. But when you are applying it to yourself as if you are that, and as if there's any evidence whatsoever that you are that, then you'll never be it. So even if it is an aspiration, if you're claiming that you have already achieved it, well, then you never will achieve it. But they put Black History Month, a parentheses in the year when the totality of the African American experience has to be contained within this 28 days, and it has to be palatable, and the whole purpose of it is actually to celebrate us for giving you Black History Month. You know, and the same goes for all of these, in my opinion anyway, my unqualified opinion, the federal holidays, like they just gave it to Juneteenth, I think last year or the year before.
Within the past 2 years, it's become a federal holiday.
Federal holiday, right? MLK Day, Martin Luther King Day, and so on. To me, this is absolutely, from again, my opinion, this is absolutely grotesque. The federal government granting these holidays or establishing these holidays, to me, is like the killer coming to the funeral of the one whom he killed and giving flowers to the widow. That's what these holidays represent to me, in my opinion. And I'm always reminded when Black History Month comes along, or when there's Juneteenth, or when it's Martin Luther King Day, or what have you. Well, I think that the useful thing about Trump is that he can package the dismantling of American empire as the building of American empire. That's what he's doing. Because you have to sell to your demographic. And Americans are not the most mature, the most realistic, the most responsible people in the world, the most well acquainted with history and so forth. So you cannot possibly sell America's necessary downsizing and the managed erosion of America and the hollowing out of America. As you know, we've made a lot of bad choices for a very long time. We've only ever really made short-term plans for the future. So it turns out that there's a lot of unavoidable, necessary changes that have to be made at your expense. You can't really sell that to the American public. You can't tell the American public that consequences are a thing. That demographic of political consumers simply cannot compute a message like that. Because look, what Trump is going to do, what he is doing, and what he will do, these are all things that were going to happen anyway, with or without him. He's just the one who's selling it to you as a good thing. That's his job. You know, he's like the guy at a company who's designated as the one to deliver the bad news to you that you're going to be let go. And you designate him for that job because he has a way of presenting it to you. He has a way of presenting to you, you being fired as the greatest opportunity of your life, you know? All the new horizons that you're going to be able to pursue and so on. That's Trump. That's Trump's job. You know, America has been stuffing balloons up their sleeves for a very long time and telling everyone that they're muscles. But now even the balloons are deflating. The great American hoax is over. And Trump is there to oversee the dismembering of American empire. The U.S. is going to be isolated, it's going to withdraw, and it's going to be non-competitive globally. And like I said, this is all unavoidable. This would have happened with or without Trump. You've simply come to the end of your life cycle as a hegemonic superpower. And the decay and the decomposition that will follow is just part of the natural process. Trump can't be blamed for that, and he can't be given credit for any of this. But his job is to make you think that none of it's happening, even while it's happening right in front of your face. This is what Trump's main job is. Because look, for example, drill, baby, drill, right? Make America energy self-sufficient, et cetera, et cetera. Fire up all of the dormant oil wells and so forth in West Texas and so on. While simultaneously asking OPEC to lower oil prices, which of course means asking OPEC to increase production. Okay. The way that goes is increase production by OPEC, and if they do it, by the US as well, okay, then the oil price drops, and cheap oil floods the market, out of sync with demand, driving the price down even further. Now the price is too low for it to even be profitable for American producers to drill, to refine, or to extract. You understand? American oil producers need for oil to be at a minimum of $40 per barrel for it to even be worth it. For it to even be worth it to drill and extract and refine and so forth. Meanwhile, OPEC can still make a profit at just $10 a barrel. So you understand, America cannot play the oil game with OPEC. OPEC has the capacity to ramp up oil production if they want to, anytime they want to. They can ramp up oil production, they can increase production to a level within just 90 days that America couldn't reach even in 5 years. In other words, OPEC can decimate the American oil and gas sector anytime they want. The only reason they don't do that is because they want to maintain price stability for their own benefit, for their own reasons. They would rather have oil at $70 a barrel or $100 a barrel rather than $10 a barrel. So they choose to allow America to stay in the game. And that's the only reason. But if you're going to ramp up oil production on your end, well, then you better hope that OPEC responds by cutting production on their end just to stabilize the price. Because if they don't, if they respond in kind and they do what you do, and they also ramp up oil production, and then they drive the price of oil down to their minimum profit level, well, that will nuke America's whole oil industry. Plants, drilling sites, refineries, all of that's going to shut down. Tens of thousands of jobs will just disappear overnight. And for every one job in the oil and gas sector, there's at least 2 or 3 jobs that are indirectly related to that. So you were looking at potentially hundreds of thousands of jobs lost by drill, baby, drill. Not to mention, when that happens, no one in the private sector is going to invest in the oil sector anymore. So you see, no more exports to Europe, no more exports anywhere, no more oil exports, energy exports. Meanwhile, you're going to abandon renewable energy, clean energy, and so on. The Green New Scam, as Trump says, he's very much against that. And at the same time, you have the UAE and you have Saudi Arabia investing hundreds of billions of dollars in the U.S. In energy-intensive businesses in the United States. I mean, Trump said it himself. If oil companies drill themselves out of business, I don't give a damn. That's what he said. So you see how the rhetoric, how the marketing actually sells the opposite of what the policy outcome is actually going to be. I don't think for a second that Trump doesn't know that. I think he knows that. No one who's putting these policies in place doesn't know what the outcomes will be. And that's why the policies are being pursued, because they want to achieve those outcomes, those very outcomes. But you can't sell that to the electorate. You can't tell the American people, you know, we, your private sector overlords, are no longer tied to the success or the prosperity or the stability of the American economy. We have global interests, not national interests. And so we've decided to drive the U.S. into energy bankruptcy as quickly as possible. And maybe then we can sell all of America's oil and gas assets to Saudi Arabia or to China or what have you for pennies. You can't tell the American people that. So instead, you say, Trump says, we're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to drill, you know, better, stronger, faster than anyone. We're going to produce more oil than anyone else in the world, and so on and so on and so on. We're number one, you know, and everyone cheers. Everyone applauds while the oxygen is being drained from the room. And let me tell you, that's exactly what's going on. The last time Trump was in office, Saudi Arabia and Russia collaborated to flood the global oil market during COVID-19, no less. And the U.S., under Trump, the U.S., the media, portrayed this as a price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. But it was transparently done. It was transparently undertaken by Russia and Saudi Arabia, specifically to undermine the American oil sector, the American oil industry. It completely crashed the oil price, making oil production completely unviable for the U.S., for U.S. producers, okay? Trump had good relations with Russia. He had good relations with Saudi Arabia, still does. And I think it's fair to say that this was a three-way collaboration, not just between Russia and Saudi Arabia. Trump was involved. And now Trump already wants to do it again within his first week in office. I don't think OPEC is going to go along with it, to be honest. Not right now. Why should they? You said drill, baby, drill, so you go ahead and do that. You go ahead. You drill. But we are not going to initiate a crash in the oil price. We need the money right now. We have projects. So you have to take Trump seriously, but never at his word. Never take him literally. But do take him seriously, because he's a mascot for a faction of power that needs to be taken very seriously. The A-National OCGFC, owners and controllers of global financialized capital. They're essentially the real unipolar superpower of the world. And Trump is their hatchet man in America. Now, generally speaking, this is going to be very good for the Muslim world. Generally speaking, it's going to be good for the Muslim world and the global South more broadly. Yes, it is. But I know that things are going to get very hard for you in the U.S. Things are going to get very hard for you in the West overall. Now, most people around the world, in the global South, they'll react to that news the same way that someone would react to hearing about a serial killer getting shanked in prison. You know, he had it coming. That's how most people feel, to be honest. But I know that most people in the West already have it hard. I know that most people in the West are actually already suffering. And I know what it's like to live in America. It's not easy. And I know that just because the consequences that you may suffer may be the result of your own actions, that doesn't make the consequences any easier to endure. I know it's going to be hard, especially when you're suffering the consequences of actions that were taken by your elites, not necessarily the actions of the common people. So I know this is hard to take, and it's going to be hard to take. Now, again, let me reiterate, this is not about Trump. It's not about Trump. The isolation, the degradation of America was going to happen anyway. It had to happen. This is just the necessary course of the logic of Western predatory capitalism. Just like Gorbachev wasn't really the one who destroyed the Soviet Union, he just oversaw the inevitable destruction, self-destruction of the Soviet Union because it had run its course. America has run its course. And when I say Western predatory capitalism, those adjectives are important because it's not even really about capitalism in and of itself. It really mostly has to do with the culture and the civilizational peculiarities of the West. They don't act like that because of capitalism. Their capitalism acts like this because of the way they are. You understand? And in fact, it's because of the way they are, that they even approach capitalism, trade, and so forth, and business the way they do. Their particular version of capitalism. And it's because of them, and because of the way they are, and because of their approach to capitalism, that the A national OCGFC even are a thing. And it's also because of this that their own societies are now on the chopping block. It's because of the way they are. But that's a topic for another day. The point is, this is something that has to happen. It's something that has to happen. It's something that had to happen. It's something that will happen. And it's going to happen, no matter what. No matter whether it's Trump or anyone else. Anyone who says, for example, well, that's what you get for voting for Trump, or you should have voted for Harris. Well, I mean, you're so thoroughly indoctrinated and participating in the deception and the deflection of that system that you yourself are just as much a cause for the collapse of the United States as anyone else that you blame for it. You created a class of a-national elites, oligarchical elites, whose private profit interests are no longer connected to your own economy. You did that. They're not connected to any productive activity. They're not connected to any nationality. They're not connected to your standard of living, not to your stability, not to your safety, your prosperity, your success as a nation, or anything. And that class of private sector powers became essentially a nation unto themselves, like I've said many times. A nation that transcends borders. It transcends national interests. They don't have any interests except their own interests. You created that, and you celebrated that, in fact. You still celebrate it, never realizing that they would inevitably sacrifice you for their own profit interests, the same way that they've sacrificed millions of people outside your country. You created this psychopathic class of predators. And you expected them to never bite the hand that feeds them, even though the hand that feeds them has always been feeding them hands, Now they can't tell the difference between the food and the feeder anymore. It's all just flesh to them. You can't raise a wolf on human flesh and expect him to distinguish between the human you are feeding him from the human who is feeding him. Eventually, he doesn't see you as his master or his owner anymore. He only sees you as food. Well, you raised the wolf on the flesh of the global south, and it turns out you taste just the same. Yes, wolves don't care if it's dark meat or light meat. They'll chew you up either way. Look, for decades, the military-industrial complex, the MIC, in America, it was a towering giant in America, in the U.S. It was the driver of the economy. It shaped policies at home and abroad. But today, there's a decline in its dominance, and that's been coming for a while. It's no longer the sole engine of the American economy. It's no longer the most important engine of the economy, or the global economy. Now, this change wasn't due to any great moral awakening or some newfound sense of conscience. No, it's the result of systemic shifts within the American economy, popular fatigue over endless wars, corruption and fraud within the military-industrial complex, and of course the rise of the A-national OCGFC. The U.S. economy has diversified. I mean, decades ago, in the 50s, say, weapons and military technology was central for America's economic growth. But today, other industries, technology, finance, obviously healthcare and so on, it surpasses that. And of course, globalization shifted the focus from building tanks and jets to dominating digital platforms, international markets, and so on. Then came the end of the Cold War. The end of the Cold War was the big shift when the Soviet Union collapsed. Then the supposed existential threat that justified the immense military budgets and spending and so on, that disappeared. That threat disappeared. I mean, you tried to come up with new threats, terrorism, war on drugs, what have you, but none of these threats really could justify the scale of investment that was needed to keep the military-industrial complex, influential. And like I said, the public became tired of wars in the 2000s. Iraq, Afghanistan, it drained the American public, emotionally, financially, politically, and people began to question the wisdom of pouring trillions and trillions of dollars into conflicts that only ever resulted in spreading chaos and destruction. Not to mention, you have rampant fraud and corruption in the military-industrial complex. You have overcharging, you have magically disappearing funds, that were handed over to defense contractors. They've misplaced enough money. The military-industrial complex, defense contractors, have misplaced enough money to house every homeless person in America and educate every child. They charge so much for one weapon that China could probably build a dozen. Hated them for it. We salute them. Even those with no faith, who genuinely struggle for the rights of their people. We salute them. It's a part of our faith. It's a part of our religion to appreciate those who genuinely stand for justice, even if we know that their vision is never going to be complete without Islam. So if you want to be proud of Ibrahim Traore because of just his skin color, go ahead. If you want to be proud of him because of his country or his continent of origin, go ahead. But we're proud of him because of his belief. He's our brother in belief. We're proud of him because of his faith. And anyone who wants to deny that or deny us that, well, you're just petty and foolish and ideologically shackled. Ibrahim Traore led a coup against a government that was subservient to its foreign masters. You know, there's been many coups across the continent, but usually those just replaced one neo-colonial agent with another, usually. But Ibrahim Traore is different. He's not just changing the government. He is uprooting the whole system of neo-colonial domination, and he's succeeding. He's understood what many people have failed to grasp, which is that independence is meaningless if you don't sever the control of the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. He's understood that security is a myth as long as it depends on the military patronage of your former colonizers. And he's understood that sovereignty is impossible under the shadow of Western tutelage. He's not merely a head of state. Ibrahim Traore is the revolutionary archetype of the 21st century. He was forged in the reality of Western-backed insurgency and Western economic warfare and propaganda. Because, you know, today the fight for freedom is not just waged by armies anymore, but by narratives and by resource policies and by alliances and by collective sovereignty. Traore has made the choice to look towards Russia and Turkey and towards other new centers of power in the multipolar world. That's strategic. Not because they're perfect allies, but because he recognizes the necessity of breaking the Western stranglehold on Burkina Faso. This is pragmatism in service to principle. This again is the methodology of Middle Nation. It's engagement without submission, cooperation without subjugation. It's trade-offs without selling out. He also understands, crucially, that Africa's liberation cannot be rented from outside. It has to be rooted in the reclamation of Africa's own wealth. You know, his moves to exert control over Burkina Faso's gold, building indigenous defense capacity and food sovereignty, these aren't just political decisions. These are acts of civilizational self-respect. It's a declaration that Africa's children will no longer be bled dry for the enrichment of Western imperial capital. We see Ibrahim Traore as a brother, not simply because of his faith, but also because of his fight. Because he embodies the spirit of the Quranic guidance to stand firmly for justice, even if it is against your own selves, even if it is against those who are in power, and even if it is against the odds. Burkina Faso isn't just a battleground today for the Burkinabe people. It's the front line in a global struggle for liberation. What Ibrahim Traore is doing is echoing in the Sahel, in Niger, in Mali, across Africa, across the Ummah, across the global south, and across the world. Every oppressed people around the world can now look to Burkina Faso and to Ibrahim Traore and say liberation looks like it's actually possible. But obviously, the global order trembles at the prospect that anyone is going to follow his example. They're afraid of his courage and his clarity and his defiance in the face of Western power and Western threats, and they should be afraid of that. They should tremble because they know the jig is up. But we know that when they get scared, they get dangerous, and Ibrahim Traore is under severe threat. There's already been something like 20 attempts on his life since coming to power. They just stopped a coup from happening last week, organized by the Americans and by the French, right there in the French embassy. Because a free Africa is just something that that old wolf can't take. You know, they've been keeping Africa in the past for so long that they know that if they let Africa get away from them, then they're going to be the ones who are consigned to history. The chains that have been holding Africa down all this time are also the only things holding the West up. So now America has said that they want to arrest him. You know, they've already tried to take him out more than once, like I said. Now they're trying to smear him.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you're doing great from whatever you're watching me from. I'm your host and presenter, Grotesque Stories. Now, you understand that throughout the history, oppressed groups have turned to spiritual frameworks to understand the dramatic political changes. Now, you know, you've heard the phrase, the first shall be last and the last shall be first, right? which is interpreted as a divine promise that moral injustice cannot remain permanent. In the context of the United States that we are talking about right now, you understand that some people believe Donald Trump's rise is not random, but it is symbolic. We need to agree on that. It is a form of historical karma. And the argument is that a nation built on slavery, a nation built on segregation and systemic anti-black violence cannot escape accountability. When such a nation elevates a leader who exposes its divisions, chaos, and moral decay, some interpret this as a universe or God allowing America to confront the consequences of racial oppression it ignored for centuries, for so many years. And you've heard some scholars argue that they bought Mr. Donald Trump so that he can expose all this rot that was within the system. Remember that Donald Trump is not a good person, but his demeanor, his personality was used to expose all this. And we saw a nation that was based on people crying, the disillusionment in the United States. And our people complain about all these things which is happening, and our people vision all these things that are happening. And so it's important for you to learn and to understand that what's going through right now, it is what we're supposed to be going through. Because a nation which was built on based on people suffering, a nation which was built based on people's difficulties, this what is happening right now, it's nothing but an exposure of what people should have known. Now, you understand that many scholars say Trump did not create America's racism. He revealed it. Yes. His rhetoric brought about the surface what had been hidden beneath polite political language. You see, for some observers, this exposure functions as a divine punishment. The same whiteness that once felt untouchable is now consumed by fear, is now consumed by a demographic decline, political instability, and internal conflict. And in that sense, Trump's presidency is interpreted as God's forcing America to look into the mirror and see the ugliness it inflicted on black people. The suffering whites feel today, the fear of decline, fear of insecurity, and fear of losing status is a small reflection of what black Americans endured for generations, brothers and sisters. Also in that point, we talk about when whiteness feels the consequences it created. Let's talk about this. For centuries, black Americans lived under insecurity created by white power, economic exploitation, state violence, lack of protection, and psychological war. And today, many white Americans express their fear of losing jobs, their fear of losing political dominance, their fear of losing their cultural control, and losing national identity. All that is happening, that we see is happening, all this is not accidental. We need to agree on that, right? Because some believe that this reversal represents divine justice. It represents not just distraction, but it represents education. A powerful group is now experiencing the vulnerability they once imposed on others. And we are all seeing this happening, right? Because Trump acted as a catalyst of that reversal, because his policies and leadership style destabilized the very white communities that once felt protected by the system, right? Because in his interpretation, the very white communities that protected the system has become the instrument through which former oppressors taste the instability they engineered. For centuries, let's talk about this. White Americans claimed moral superiority. They were more civilized, rational, and chosen to lead. But Trump era shattered the image because global protection shifted. The world saw white Americans fight each other, storm their own capital, reject science, and descend into political chaos. The civilized leader collapsed. The civilized leader image collapsed. This mirrors the biblical theme where the proud and arrogant are being humbled. In theological interpretations, God often allowed leaders who expose hypocrisy rather than hide it. And Trump's impact on white Americans' global reputation becomes symbolically a punishment for centuries of pretending moral authority while oppressing black people. So this is all what that happens, and we need to understand in real context and in real time, right? For decades, we have heard black thinkers, theologians, and activists who have warned America. Your treatment of black people will lead to destruction of you. Remember Frederick Douglass, who talked about this? Remember Martin Luther King, who also talked about this? Remember Malcolm X, who talked about this? Remember James Baldwin, who also talked about this? The warning was consistent, and every leader that talked about this had the same warning towards America, right? And racial oppression corrupts the soul of a nation. America's ignored warning instead of repentance. It chose denial. In many religious interpretation, when a nation rejects justice, God allows confusion and chaos to take over its leadership. And Trump, therefore, becomes a symbol of what happens when a nation refuses to heal its foundational sin. Instead of progress, it experiences division and self-destruction, brothers and sisters. So, while white Americans experience decline and confusion, we are seeing something. We are seeing black Americans continuing to rise in cultural influence, political visibility, intellectual leadership, global impact. And this matches all the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Right? A metaphor which not necessarily in literal dominance, but in moral, cultural, and spiritual authority. The world listens to black voices, adopts black music, studies black history, and acknowledges black suffering. Meanwhile, whiteness struggles with identity, meaning, and unity. The contrast is sharp. The group once oppressed now shapes the moral the conscience of the nation, while the group once dominant experiences fragmentation. Trump accelerates this reversal by destabilizing the structure that protected white supremacy. So, really, let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you've, what you've learned throughout the video, what you've seen, what you've understood, and how this is impacting how you feel about all these geopolitical issues, the geopolitical stances, and how this changes how you feel about all this crazy stuff that are happening in the United States. As you know, I'm your number one host and presenter, Grotesque Stories. And if you know you're watching it for the first time, I'm asking you to please subscribe to the channel, join the membership, and really get to see what I can offer you. Please, if you're always watching my video and you've subscribed to the channel, kindly check, because there's something fishy with YouTube that is trying to do. YouTube is trying to unsubscribe people unknowingly. So please, I'm asking you to please resubscribe to the channel, because this is something that is happening and I feel like we all need to talk about it, right? So please, let me know what you think and feel about this video. I'm your host and presenter, Grotesque Stories. But until then, let me see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salute.